Story time on how my dad cheated on my mom with my boyfriend, and she was the one to walk in on them. Okay, so boom, my parents were happily married and been together for 20 years. My mom and my dad were both 48 years old and I was 16. Now my boyfriend, who my parents loved and treated like their own, was also 16. My boyfriend was a little feminine, but nothing crazy. There was a couple rumors in school of him being gay, but there was never any proof and he always denied it. A weird dynamic in me and my boyfriend's relationship is that he never really wanted to get freaky with me. I had to practically beg him to make out with me. And at times when we were doing the nasty, sometimes his hot dog would, I became kind of insecure, but he just told me that he was one of those guys that weren't affectionate. And the way he would console me and embrace me, I believed him and thought it was normal. Other than that, our relationship was pretty peaceful. Well, him and my dad's relationship was always weird. And you, me, and my mom, we're about to find out why. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how my dad cheated on my mom with my boyfriend and she was the one to walk in on them. Okay, so boom, like I said, my dad and my boyfriend's relationship was always weird. My boyfriend would come over my house like every day and spend time with me and my dad. Not so much my mom because my mom worked the night shift. He would usually get to know my mom on her off days, which was Saturday and Sundays. So over the year that my boyfriend's been coming over, my boyfriend would always end up in my dad's room. My boyfriend would tell me that he's gonna go over to my dad's room and play Xbox with him. I tried going in the room sometimes just to watch them play, but they both convinced me that it was a guy's thing. And it was a bonding moment, like a father and son type of thing. So I would always just do my own thing in my room and wait for my boyfriend to come back. Well, one Monday night when my mom is supposed to be working, she actually wasn't feeling good, so she came back home. I myself didn't even know my mom came back. So I know for a fact that my dad and my brother didn't hear either. All of a sudden, I heard my mom open their room door and scream, "Oh my God!" And I immediately ran out my room like for part 3. Part 3 on how my dad cheated on my mom with my boyfriend, and she was the one who walked in on them. Okay, so boom, like I said, my mom opened the door and screamed, "Oh my God!" I immediately ran out my room and went to my mom and stood right next to her. Me and my mom stood there in shock while we looked at my dad's hot dog in my boyfriend's peach. All 4 of us was literally frozen in place. My mom's reaction is actually something you wouldn't expect. She didn't fight or anything. She just closed the door, told me to go to my room, called the cops on my dad, because obviously my boyfriend is a minor. Police came, took my dad, brought him to jail, and my mom divorced him. No kicking, no fighting, no none of that. Not even any screaming. I'm not gonna lie, I told everyone in my school. It got so bad for my boyfriend, he had to actually change schools. And his parents are currently taking my dad to court. Now, me and my mom literally both don't speak to my dad. And yeah, me and my mom bonded, because we were both literally cheated on with each other's significant others. So if your boyfriend says he's gonna play games with your dad, ask him what type of game. Story time on how I had to beat my best friend and my boyfriend's ass. Okay, so boom, me and my best friend have been friends for 8 years. Years later, when I met my boyfriend and we started dating, my best friend was always weirdly jealous. I didn't think much of it because I thought we were best friends and she would never do something like that to me, you know? Or so I thought. Well, one day me and my best friend were shopping and she got a text. She then tells me she has to go and just leaves. I didn't even have a chance to tell her bye. So I call my boyfriend and I say, "Hey, where are you?" Then I hear the door close and a girl's voice in the background. I asked him, "What was that? Who is that?" And he had the audacity to say that was his mom. So I got to his house and talked to his mom and she said he wasn't there. Then his mom tells me he went to a hotel room. She told me the info and I went there. And guess what I found out? Like part 2 on how I had to beat my best friend and my boyfriend's ass. Okay, so boom, like I said, his mom tells me he's in a hotel room and gives me the info. So I go over there. I needed to investigate. So I got there and when I approached the room, I heard moaning. What? My heart dropped and I immediately started knocking on the door. But I didn't say it was me. I start to get so nervous thinking about what's going on in there. Then my boyfriend answers the door with his robe on and I immediately pushed him to the side to find my best friend naked on the bed. That's when I ended up beating their asses. I was actually beating them up so bad that a random girl in the hallway had to come in and stop the fight. Y'all know how the typical boy begging to come back and the best friend hating thing? Yeah, I was good off of that. Good riddance. I'm glad I taught them a lesson. Story time on how my brother got me pregnant. We jumping right into it. Okay, so boom. I came out to my parents and told them I was gay. My parents were not having it and they were pissed. My parents were actually so mad they kicked me out. After my parents kicked me out, my brother told me he would let me back in the house if I did the nasty with him. I know, sounds crazy. Why would I do that? But I was young at the time and I was dumb. I was young and dumb. So I agreed and I did the nasty with my brother. So I was living in my parents' house in secret and hiding every time they would be around. It worked at first, but I was always nauseous and throwing up, so they eventually found out that I was still in the house. My mom realized I was having pregnancy symptoms and said to me, "Oh, you're not gay." Imagine your parents being so happy that you're pregnant instead of gay. But wait till they find out who the father is. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how my brother got me pregnant. Okay, so boom, like I said, my mom realized I was having pregnancy symptoms and said, "Oh, you're not gay." I was so confused, but when I took the pregnancy test, I tested positive and realized that I was pregnant. I immediately knew the father was my brother, because I lost my V card to my brother, and he's literally the only person I've ever done the nasty with. And when I told my brother, he was happy. Like, happy as fuck. Apparently, my brother always liked me, so getting me pregnant was a great news for him, even though I'm his little sister. Yuck. I ended up cussing my brother out. We fought, and I literally violated him, y'all. I said some not so kind words to that man. Obviously, once my parents found out, it was over for me. I ran away and left and became a stripper. Then I eventually found an amazing man who I married, and now I'm 29 with 2 beautiful, kind daughters. Bye. This is why you shouldn't marry a professor. Okay, so boom. My husband is a professor at a university and he loves his job. Maybe a little too much. So my husband is 50 and I'm 40, and lately he hasn't been wanting to be intimate with me at all. He's been coming home from work way later than usual, saying that he's tutoring some students. Well, I decided to cook my husband's favorite meal and surprise him for working so hard. I went to the university and opened his classroom door, and I couldn't believe my eyes. His classroom was empty, but I did see his car in a lot, so I went over to see if maybe he was just heading home. Well, when I went back downstairs, I was happy to see his car was still there. The car looked like it was shaking a little bit, but it was dark, so I just wasn't sure what was going on. I walked over to his car, and there it was. I was in complete shock. Like for part 2. This is why you shouldn't marry a professor, part 2. Okay, so boom, like I said, I opened his classroom door and it was empty, but I did see his car downstairs, so I went back downstairs. I was happy to see his car was still downstairs, and it looked like it was shaking a little bit, but I just didn't know what was going on because it was a little bit dark. Well, I walked over to my husband's car, and there it was. My husband was in the backseat of his car with a student, and obviously not tutoring. And to my surprise, his student was a 23-year-old boy. And some back actions were taking place, child, if you know what I mean. I was so shocked, I dropped the food and I ran and went home. I didn't even give my husband a chance to react. He begged me not to leave him and said it was nothing and that he loved me. I obviously divorced him, and can you believe he's still with that same student now? Child, like for part 3. This is why you shouldn't marry a professor, part 3. Okay, so boom, like I said, I caught my husband in the backseat of his car with a 23-year-old boy, which was his student. He begged me not to leave him and said that he loved me, but I obviously divorced him because, whoa. At the time, I was hurt, but I genuinely got over it because at least he's living his truth now. I, on the other hand, finally had the kids I always wanted at 42, and I'm happily married with my new husband that's so in love with me. Stay away from them professors. Story time on how I slept with a ghost that haunted my house. And no, I'm not crazy. Okay, so boom, I live in a haunted house with my parents and my little brother. I'm 16 and we've been dealing with this haunting for the past 8 years. My parents tried to move houses, but they followed us and continued to haunt my family. I would wake up to doors being wide open, things around the house being moved, and my mom even said one of these ghosts pushed her while she was opening the fridge. My little brother is so scared he sleeps with my parents every night. Let's just say lots of crazy weird things was happening. Well, one night, one of these ghosts got in my bed. I woke up and felt a presence right next to me. That presence was all up in my grill. Then it disappeared. This started happening every night, and I kind of started expecting it. Well, one night something changed, and the ghost had different plans. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how I slept with a ghost that haunted my house. Okay, so boom, like I said, this night the ghost had different plans for me. I felt my sheets slightly slip down and pressure on my body. The pressure made my body feel so heavy, and then I started feeling some things. And by the time those things was over, I just realized I did the nasty with a ghost. You gotta work with me. TikTok won't let me explain those things. Anyways, I told my parents and they were not having it. They paid big money to fly someone in and have them blessed and clear the home from any hauntings. We tried this before, but it didn't work. My parents just finally went with the big guns and hired the expensive guy, because at this point things were going too far. So far, it looks like it worked because none of us felt any hauntings.